Thandao Chanda moved from room to room, making sure every candle was lit and every ribbon sat perfectly in place. This Christmas Eve felt special to her. Finally, after years of family tension, she was hosting the celebration in her own Lusaka home. The house looked warm and festive, with soft lights, fresh flowers, and the smell of roasted chicken floating through the air. She wanted everything to feel welcoming. For a moment, she actually believed the night would go smoothly. But the peace didn't last long. The door opened, and in walked her husband's sister, Chipo Mwale. Chipo didn't smile. She didn't greet anyone properly. Instead, her eyes swept across the living room, the tall Christmas tree, the polished floors, the elegant decor. Everything Thandao had worked so hard to create. Her expression wasn't admiration. It was something closer to jealousy or ownership. Before Thandao could say Merry Christmas, Chipo leaned toward her mother, Mama Dorothy, and whispered something. Whatever it was made Mama Dorothy smirk. They both looked around the house with the same expression, like they were inspecting property that didn't belong to Thandao. Thandao felt the shift instantly. A quiet heaviness settled over the room. Her smile faded just a little, and she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, trying to ignore the prickling feeling in her chest. She had hoped tonight would finally bring the family together. But as she watched Chipo and Mama Dorothy exchange knowing looks, she realized something was off. Very off. A cold thought slid into her mind as she stood there, holding a tray of drinks. Something is wrong tonight. And Thandai wasn't wrong. This Christmas Eve was about to take a turn she would never forget. The disrespect didn't explode all at once. It started quietly, almost too quietly to react to. At first, Chipo walked around the living room, touching the ornaments on the tree and lifting the edge of the table runner, like she was checking for dust. She gave a small laugh and said, interesting decor. Very flashy. Her tone made it clear she didn't mean it as a compliment. Thandai tried to brush it off. She had promised herself she wouldn't let anyone ruin her Christmas. But then Chipo moved to the dining area and tapped on the crystal glasses. These look expensive, she said loudly. You like showing off these days, huh? Mama Dorothy nodded, as if Chipo had pointed out something important. Thandai kept her smile steady, but it was getting harder. When dinner began, it only got worse. Chipo took a bite of the chicken and raised her eyebrows dramatically. Oh, okay. It's all right. Not the way we cook at home, but it's fine, she said, making sure everyone heard her. Then she added, some people think fancy food means good food. Thandai felt a sting, but she still stayed silent. She didn't want to start a fight in front of the guests. Even her outfit wasn't safe. Chipo stared at Thandai's elegant red dress and said, you dressed like you're attending a gala. It's just a family dinner, not a competition. She laughed, and Mama Dorothy laughed with her. Through all of this, Mubanga, Thandai's husband, sat quietly at the table. He kept adjusting his shirt, glancing around awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable, but saying nothing. Every time Thandai looked at him, he quickly looked away. His silence hurt more than Chipo's words. Chipo, seeing that no one was stopping her, pushed further. She leaned back in her chair and said loudly, you know why she's doing all this, right? She didn't earn any of it. This house, this furniture, all this decoration, it's not hers. She's just spending my brother's money like water. Thandai's heart clenched. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Chipo stood up a little straighter and delivered the insult that froze the entire room. You only got this house because my brother is soft, she said, pointing at Thandai. A real Mwale woman would never let her husband be ordered around. The words hit like a slap. Conversation stopped. Forks paused midair. Even the children playing with their new toys went silent, sensing the tension. Mama Dorothy sat proudly with her arms crossed, as if Chipo had just spoken the truth the whole world needed to hear. Thandai felt the entire room watching her, some in shock, some uncomfortable, and some clearly entertained by the drama. Her face was calm, but inside her chest a storm was forming. Every insult, every little jab, every dismissive look, it all stacked up until it became something sharp and heavy inside her. For the first time that night, she realized this wasn't just jealousy this was planned, this was intentional, and they were waiting for her to break. But Thandai Chanda was not about to break. Thandai was trying her best to keep the evening together. After all the rude comments, she still went to the kitchen, took a deep breath, and picked up the dessert tray. She had prepared a beautiful chocolate mousse with fresh berries, something she knew everyone loved. She hoped maybe dessert would soften the atmosphere. But the moment she stepped back into the dining room, holding the tray carefully, everything changed in a single second. Chipo suddenly shoved her chair back and stood up so fast it startled people around her. She pointed straight at Thandai like she was scolding a child and yelled at the top of her lungs, "Get out of this house!" The words hit the room like thunder. "You don't deserve to host us," she screamed again, louder this time. The dessert tray shook in Thandai's hand. Guests gasped. Someone covered their mouth. Even the kids peeked from behind the hallway door, frozen. It was so quiet afterward that Thandai could hear her own heartbeat. Then Mama Dorothy leaned back in her chair, completely unbothered, and nodded proudly as if Chipo had done something heroic. With a cold smile, she added, "This home belongs to our son. You just decorate it." She said it casually, slowly, like she wanted the words to sting deep. Thandai stood there, still holding the dessert tray, her arms slightly trembling, not from weakness, but from anger trying to push its way out. Her eyes swept across the table, searching for her husband, Nybenga, her partner, the one who was supposed to protect her. He sat there stiffly, staring at his plate. His mouth opened a little, then closed. He rubbed his hands nervously, his knee bouncing under the table. But he said absolutely nothing, not a word. His silence felt like betrayal. The room remained painfully quiet until Chipo let out a mocking, "What are you waiting for?" she asked sharply. "Get out! You're embarrassing yourself." Someone whispered, "This is too much," but no one dared to speak louder. Thandai took a slow breath. Her chest felt tight, but her face stayed calm, almost too calm. She placed the dessert tray on the table, as gently as if she were setting down a newborn. Inside, her emotions were twisting and burning. Humiliation, hurt, disbelief. But through all that pain, something stronger rose. Pure, sharp anger. Not the kind that explodes. The kind that focuses. The kind that makes a woman dangerous. Chipo crossed her arms, ready to celebrate her little victory. Mama Dorothy smirked, certain that Thandai would cry, run out, or collapse under pressure. But Thandai did none of that. She straightened her back, lifted her chin slightly, and looked right at Chipo with eyes that no longer looked hurt, but powerful. Thandai's hands were still shaking, but now it wasn't fear. It was the beginning of a storm she was about to unleash, calmly, beautifully, and with precision they never saw coming. For a long second, nobody moved. The air felt heavy, almost too thick to breathe. Chipo still stood there with her finger pointed, waiting for Thandai to break down. Mama Dorothy watched proudly. Nybenga stared at the table like it would swallow him if he looked up. But when Thandai finally spoke, her voice was steady, soft, controlled. "Are you sure you want me to leave?" That single sentence made several people shift uncomfortably. It wasn't the reaction anyone expected. They had prepared for tears, anger, maybe even shouting. But this calmness, it was unsettling. Chipo, however, didn't notice the shift. She took it as a victory. She smiled wide, the kind of smile someone wears when they think they've finally defeated their biggest enemy. "Yes," she said loudly. "I'm very sure." Thandai simply nodded once, slow, thoughtful, almost polite. Then she stepped away from the table. No drama, no raised voice. She walked quietly across the living room, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Everyone watched her, confused. Even the kids peeking from the hallway held their breath. She disappeared down the hallway toward her home office. Chipo smirked and sat down with a satisfied sigh. "Finally," she whispered to her mother. "She knows her place now." But Mama Dorothy wasn't entirely relaxed. There was something about the way Thandai walked out, something too calm, too confident. A woman who had truly been defeated wouldn't walk that way. Meanwhile, Nybenga swallowed hard. "Chipo," he whispered. "I think." Chipo shot him a glare that shut him up instantly. In the office, Thandai entered a different, her private space, her sanctuary. She closed the door, exhaled slowly, and walked straight to the corner where a small safe sat hidden behind a framed painting. Her hands no longer trembled. She entered the code, click. The safe door opened. Inside were neatly arranged folders, documents, and one brown envelope that she had prepared months earlier, just in case this day ever came. She pulled it out with steady fingers. Then she paused. She wasn't angry anymore, not the wild kind of anger. What she felt now was clarity, a strange, powerful peace, like a woman who finally stops running and decides to stand her ground. When she walked back to the dining room, she didn't rush. She didn't stomp. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had already won. The room grew silent the moment she appeared. Chipo's smile faltered for a second, but she forced it back, not understanding the danger yet. Mama Dorothy sat straighter, suddenly alert. Nybenga's eyes widened. He could tell something was coming. Thandai held the brown envelope gently in one hand. She walked to the dining table with slow, measured steps, like a judge entering a courtroom. She didn't need to shout. Her calmness spoke loud enough. Thandai didn't rush. She placed the brown envelope on the dining table carefully, almost gently, as if it contained something fragile. The room had gone so quiet that even the sound of the envelope sliding across the polished wood felt loud. Everyone stared at her, confused, curious, nervous. Chipo smirked. "What's that? Divorce papers?" she asked with a laugh, trying to sound bold, but her voice wobbled. Thandai didn't respond. Instead, she opened the envelope and pulled out the first document, a thick, stamped paper, and laid it flat on the table. "This," she said calmly, "is the official property ownership." The title deed sat there like a silent bomb. Some of the guests leaned in, eyes wide. Mama Dorothy's smile faded instantly. Thandau took out another stack of papers. Receipts, bank slips, contractor invoices. Each one placed slowly, neatly, forming a line like evidence in a courtroom. These, she continued, are renovation receipts. Every room you just insulted? I paid for them. Every upgrade? Every repair? That was me. Nyubanga swallowed hard. Chipo blinked rapidly, her confidence leaking like air from a broken balloon. Then came the third set, printed bank transfer record. And these, Thandau said softly, are the funds used to purchase the land itself. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. The room felt smaller, warmer, tighter. Finally, she pulled out the last document, a well-protected, signed, and notarized agreement. She placed it gently on top of the others. And this, she said, meeting Mama Dorothy's eyes, is the prenup your late husband wrote. He signed it 5 months before he passed. A few people gasped. Even Chipo stopped breathing for a moment. Thandau continued, her voice steady but cutting. Your husband gifted me the house and the land. He said it was his way of thanking me for taking care of him during the last year of his illness. Silence. Heavy, crushing silence. Not one person at the table moved. Not one person spoke. Mama Dorothy's face drained of color so fast it was almost shocking. She looked like someone had pulled the ground from under her chair. Her lips trembled, and in a small, shaky voice she whispered, That can't be. But the signatures on the documents said otherwise. Chipo's mouth opened and closed like she was searching for air. Her hands trembled so visibly that the bracelet around her wrist jingled. Wait, she stuttered. What do you mean this house is yours? You're lying. You must be lying. Thandau didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply turned one document around so they could read it again, the deed with her full name written clearly across the top. Everything you see here, she said calmly, belongs to me. Legally. Fully. The truth hit the room like lightning. Chipo staggered back into her chair. Mama Dorothy clutched her chest. Nyubanga finally looked up at his wife, shocked, ashamed, and speechless. Thandau stood there, not as a woman they tried to humiliate, but as the owner of the very home they tried to throw her out of. And now everyone knew it. The room felt frozen in time. Everyone stared at the documents spread across the table, each one proving that the house they were sitting in belonged to the woman they had just tried to humiliate. Thandau let the silence sit there for a moment longer. She wanted everyone to truly understand what they had just done. Then she straightened her back, lifted her chin slightly, and looked directly at Chipo. Her voice was calm, smooth like velvet, but sharp enough to cut glass. Since you ordered me out of my house, she said slowly, I'll respect your request. A few people inhaled sharply. Chipo blinked. What are you talking about? Thandau continued. But that means all of you must leave as well. It was so quiet that a pin could have dropped and echoed. Mama Dorothy nearly jumped in her seat, her eyes wide like she'd seen a ghost. Chipo's jaw fell open. She looked like someone had slapped her with reality. You want us to leave? Chipo whispered, stunned. Thandau didn't answer with words. Instead, she turned gracefully, no rush, no panic, and walked toward the front door. Her steps were steady, controlled, powerful. Every move said one thing clearly. I am the owner here, not you. She reached the door, unlocked it, and pulled it open with a soft click. The cool Lusaka night breeze rushed inside, mixing with the warm Christmas air from the dining room. Then she turned around, her hand resting lightly on the doorframe. Her expression was polite, almost too polite. Please, she said, gesturing toward the open door. Merry Christmas. Her tone was gentle, like she was offering a slice of cake, not escorting people out of her multimillion kwacha home. But that softness carried a lethal edge. It was the kind of tone that made grown adults rethink every life choice they had ever made. For a few seconds, no one moved. They just stared at her, stunned, embarrassed, and unsure of what to do. Mama Dorothy was the first to react. You can't do this, she snapped, her voice cracking. This is your husband's house. Thandau simply pointed at the documents, still lying open on the table. Those papers say otherwise, she replied calmly. Chipo stood up so fast her chair screeched against the floor. She looked around for support, but everyone avoided her eyes. Even the guests they'd invited without asking looked uncomfortable. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of this moment. Thandau didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult anyone. She just stood there holding the door open like a queen who had decided court was over for the night. Out, she said softly. All of you. Chipo swallowed hard and walked toward the door, her face burning with humiliation. Mama Dorothy followed, muttering under her breath, but powerless. The guests hurried out quickly, whispering and avoiding eye contact. And Thandau? She watched them leave one by one, calm and unbothered. This was her house, her peace. And tonight she chose herself. Thandau held the front door open with the same calmness she'd carried all night. But the moment Mama Dorothy stepped outside, the real drama began. The elderly woman planted her feet firmly on the porch and shouted, I'm not going anywhere. You cannot throw me out like a stranger. Her voice echoed across the quiet Lusaka neighborhood. Lights switched on in nearby houses as curious neighbors peeked through curtains. Chipo rushed to her mother's side. This is ridiculous. You can't embarrass us like this, she yelled, pointing at Thandai as if she were the villain in the story. Thandai remained still. Not a single muscle twitched. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She simply watched them with the calm eyes of someone who had already won. The shouting grew louder, and that's when the security guard appeared from the gate. A tall, serious man named Kelvin. He worked for Thandai directly, not for Mubanga, and definitely not for his family. Kelvin approached respectfully. Madam Thandai, everything all right? Before Thandai could even speak, Chipo turned to him dramatically. Tell her she can't do this. We are family. This is our house too. Kelvin didn't blink. Madam, this home belongs to Mrs. Chanda, he said firmly, and she is asking everyone to leave. So please let's go. Chipo's mouth fell open. She wasn't used to being told no, especially not by staff she assumed she could command. Mama Dorothy tried one last time, waving her hands angrily. You can't push an old woman out on Christmas Eve. Kelvin stepped slightly forward, not aggressively, but with enough authority to remind them that refusing wasn't an option. Ma'am, please don't force me to call additional security. That was it. The fight left their bodies instantly. Mama Dorothy huffed, grabbed her handbag, and marched toward the driveway. Chipo followed behind, her face red with humiliation. The guests they had invited without permission scrambled out like they were escaping a burning house, whispering about how they'd never expected this kind of scene. Somebody even tripped over the garden step in their rush to leave. And all the while, neighbors watched from doorways and windows. Thandai didn't care about the whispers. She didn't care about the stares. What mattered was her peace, and she was claiming it. When the last person stepped out, she gently closed the door. The house fell into a deep, eerie quiet. Only one person remained behind Mubanga. He sat on a chair, elbows on his knees, hands covering his face. He looked defeated, ashamed, and lost. The man who had once promised to protect her couldn't even raise his voice to defend her tonight. Thandai walked toward him slowly. He looked up at her, eyes wet and full of regret. But she didn't comfort him. She didn't sit beside him. She stood tall, a woman who had reached her breaking point long ago, and finally stepped over it. Your silence today, she said softly, told me everything. The words sliced deeper than any shouting ever could. Mubanga lowered his head again, and Thandai turned away, because at this point, she knew she was standing alone, but she was stronger than she had ever been. The house was quiet, too quiet, after the chaos at the door. The Christmas lights glowed softly, the food on the table sat untouched, and the faint smell of cinnamon hung in the air. But the warmth of the evening was gone. All that remained was the heavy silence between Thandai and Mubanga. Mubanga was still sitting on the dining chair, shoulders slumped, hands clasped together like he was trying to hold himself together. He didn't look like the confident man she married. He looked small, confused, broken. But Thandai didn't feel sorry for him anymore. Not tonight. She walked toward him with slow, steady steps. For a moment, he thought she came to comfort him. He straightened a little, trying to prepare himself for some kind of apology or conversation. But Thandai wasn't here to soothe him. She stopped in front of him and placed a white envelope on the table beside his arm. His eyes flicked to it, then back to her. What's this? He whispered, his voice barely steady. Open it, she said calmly. He hesitated, then slowly tore it open. As he read the first few lines, his eyes widened. His hands shook. This is a separation notice? He stammered. Thandai nodded gently. 30 days. Mubanga blinked, struggling to understand. But, when did you prepare this? Why is it signed already? Her answer cut straight through him. I signed it months ago, she said quietly, because I knew this day would come. I hoped I was wrong. But tonight proved everything. He lowered the paper slowly, like it suddenly weighed 100 kilograms. You planned this, he whispered. No, she replied softly. Your family planned this the moment they decided to humiliate me. I just prepared for the day you wouldn't protect me. The words hit him harder than any shouting could. He swallowed hard and tried to speak. Thandai, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't think they would. You didn't think at all, she cut in, still calm. You sat there and watched me get insulted in my own home. You didn't say one word. Mubanga's face crumpled with guilt. I froze. I didn't know what to do. Thandai sighed, her voice soft but firm. You didn't freeze, Mubanga. You chose silence. And silence is a choice. He looked at her then, really looked, and the truth finally settled in his eyes. He hadn't just failed her tonight. He had failed her for years. Every time he allowed his family to disrespect her, to undermine her, to treat her like an outsider. He found himself speechless again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was regret, heavy, choking regret. Thandai continued, you can come back, only after therapy. And only after you prove that you can stand up to your family. Not for me, for yourself. Because if you don't fix this, you'll repeat it again. He nodded slowly, tears gathering at the corners of his eyes. I'll do anything, he whispered. Just please don't leave me. She took a step back, not cold but clear. I'm not leaving you, she said. I'm giving you a chance to become the man you promised you would be. And with that, she turned away, leaving Mubanga staring at the envelope, a bitter reminder of the moment he realized, far too late, how deeply he had failed the woman who loved him. No one had planned for the video. Chipo had been so caught up in her triumph, so proud of herself for yelling at Thandai, that she didn't notice her cousin holding a phone across the room. The camera had been rolling, capturing every second. The pointing, the screaming, the demand. Get out of this house! It was raw. It was embarrassing. And it was about to go viral. By the next morning, the video had already spread through Lusaka's family WhatsApp group. First came the shocked messages from distant relatives. Did this really happen? I can't believe what I just watched. Then the laughing emojis, the gasps, and the incredulous comments piled up. Chipo's smug expression from the night before now looked foolish and cruel on every screen. People began forwarding it to their friends, adding commentary. Who even behaves like that? Disrespecting a woman in her own home? The clip racked up thousands of views in hours, and Chipo's reputation began to crumble in real time. Even her closest friends couldn't defend her. The proud, confident woman from the night before was now the subject of whispers and online ridicule. The consequences hit even harder when Chipo's fiancé's family saw the clip. Shocked and embarrassed, they called off the engagement immediately. No explanations, no warnings, just a message that ended the plans Chipo had thought were secure. Her world, which had seemed so certain, started collapsing piece by piece. Meanwhile, Mama Dorothy tried desperately to save face. She called relatives, friends, even neighbors, blaming Thandai for provoking Chipo, claiming she had set her up. But when people looked at the video, there was no doubt. Thandai was calm, collected, and dignified throughout. Chipo and Mama Dorothy were the ones losing control. Even Chipo's cousin, who had accidentally recorded the video, became a hero among family circles for capturing the truth. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was sharing it. The embarrassment was public, undeniable, and humiliating. Chipo's social media accounts flooded with comments. Some were sympathetic at first, but as the clip circulated, the backlash intensified. Friends turned cold. Conversations stopped. Invitations disappeared. The engagement, the house drama, the pride, it all crumbled because of one moment captured on a phone. And through it all, Thandai remained untouched. She didn't need to say a word online. She didn't need to defend herself or gloat. The truth had spoken for her. Chipo's arrogance had been recorded, preserved, and shared for everyone to see. By the end of the week, Lusaka was buzzing. Chipo was being called out everywhere. Her fiancé's family had moved on. Mama Dorothy had no allies. And Thandai? She was quietly enjoying her morning tea in peace, knowing the universe had dealt the punishment that Chipo and Mama Dorothy had brought upon themselves. The downfall had begun, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Christmas morning arrived in Lusaka with a calm Thandai hadn't felt in years. The city outside was still waking up, but her veranda offered a quiet sanctuary. She wrapped her hands around a warm cup of rooibos tea, inhaling the spicy, comforting aroma, and watched as the first rays of sunlight painted the sky with soft pinks and golds. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace. There were no arguments, no insults, no demands. Just the gentle morning breeze and the soft chirping of birds. Thandai decided that today wouldn't be about anyone else. She turned the holiday into her own solo retreat, walking slowly through her garden, reading a few pages of her favorite book, and savoring moments she had often rushed past in the chaos of family drama. As she sipped her tea, she reflected on everything that had happened over the past week. The humiliation, the anger, the calm she had summoned in the face of Chipo and Mama Dorothy. All of it led her to a simple truth. Respect is not given to the loudest voice, but to the one who owns the ground they stand on. A month later, Mubanga returned. He was different now, humble, sincere, and full of regret. He apologized, not just with words, but with the quiet acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. He had finally realized what it meant to stand up for the woman he claimed to love. Thandai listened. She weighed her feelings, her boundaries, and the lessons she had learned. Whether she chose to accept him back or not, it no longer mattered. She had already claimed her peace, her power, and her dignity. That Christmas wasn't just a holiday. It was a turning point. Thandai had faced humiliation, betrayal, and family chaos and emerged stronger, wiser, and unshakably herself. She had already won.